Sorry, we can they can sneak in.
All right, everyone, hello. Welcome to Insects in a Changing World, Connecticut Insects. This is my friend Max Galdos-Shapiro, who's a very smart person who knows a lot about outside things. They're gonna share some of that knowledge with you today, and glad y'all came.
Thanks, Julia. How y'all doing today?
Good.
All right. Thank you so much for being here. Julia said, my name is Max. I am a career environmental educator. I've been teaching for about a decade here in Berkshire County. Specifically, I teach science, environmental science, and even more specifically, ecology and climate science. So one thing I am not is an entomologist. I am not an insect scientist. And so the way I'm going to be speaking today is as an ecologist, which means I'm going to be talking about the way these creatures interact with each other and their place. The thing that I personally, as a scientist, am obsessed with is how humans and decisions we make affect the functioning of the natural world. And so we're also going to talk about that because we can't talk about insects without talking about climate change. And here in the Northeast, we are experiencing climate change already. We are one of the places where things are warming faster than average. We likely have already passed some of the global thresholds that are often discussed. So this is something that's very prescient for us. These are things that we are seeing change all of it. I actually grew up in Northwest Connecticut. I grew up in Litchfield, right on the Litchfield-Torrington line, before moving to Great Barrington about 15 years ago, where I've been ever since. As an environmental educator, I have had a chance to work with thousands of students, mainly in their classrooms, but also after school. I ran a summer camp in Lawrence, Massachusetts called Berkshire Nature Camp. And this is something I love to do. So Julia, thank you so much. And thank you to everybody at the library for asking me to come in and talk about something that I enjoy. So we have about an hour and a half together. We are not going to talk. I'm not going to talk with you for an hour and a half. We are going to save some time for questions at the end. And then if there's even other leftover time, I'm happy to hang around and chat with anybody if there are other things that you want to know about. So we're going to talk about four kind of key areas. The first, we're going to talk a little bit about insects, their form and their function, because I can't help myself. When I saw that this talk was called Love a Bug, I immediately thought to myself, well, all bugs are insects, but not all insects are bugs. And so we're going to talk a little bit about how we divide up the insects, please.
Well, considering if you go with the arachnids and you have arachnids are technically classified as insects, but they're technically classified as bugs, but they're technically not exactly insects. And same thing with hexapods too. And
this illustrates something really important about the names that we use. And so I'm going to use a mix of common names and scientific names, because the scientific names help us categorize things in a more concrete way, whereas common names like bug, what is your name, my friend?
Emerson.
Emerson, nice to meet you, Emerson. As Emerson pointed out, a lot of things can be called a bug. Even things like arachnids, other arthropods, like insects. We're going to talk a little bit about the context of this place. Why talk about insects in Northwest Connecticut? Why care about insects in Northwest Connecticut? There are three in particular I would like to highlight today. Three that I think are maybe, if not misunderstood, maybe even not known about. And they do some really cool things. And I think they illustrate some of the interactions we see. And then finally, because we're talking about climate change, can't leave without talking about how do we help, what can we do, and how do we find the things that we can do and the things that speak to us that will help all of these creatures. All right, let's talk about what makes an insect an insect. An insect is, of course, an arthropodic creature that is an exothermic. It cannot make its own heat. It must absorb it. Its body is in sections and it has an exoskeleton. So unlike us that have hard bones, they have a hard shell. Insects are a type of arthropod. They have 3 pairs of legs, so 6 legs total. They often have 2 pairs of wings, so 4 wings total, although there is one very specific exception that we are going to discuss today.
Also, they can have usually compound eyes.
And that's correct.
Compound eyes.
Emerson, can you tell us what a compound eye is?
It's like the eyes that see the light and shadows on the top of their head. So all the regular eyes see everything.
Exactly. We have more than one eye working in concert, hence the name compound. They also, most of them at least, lay eggs, and they have a multi-stage life cycle. we're gonna start basic and we're gonna get more specific as we go. The multi-stage life cycle is really important. Many of them have three: egg, juvenile, adult, larva, or nymph. And then there's the fourth, one set of four. So egg, larva, pupa, adult, like a butterfly. When we think about insects, there's a lot. There are millions of species worldwide, and we are discovering new ones all the time. So when you start to think about a big group like this, it becomes really valuable to start to break them up into categories. When I used to teach people to identify insects, this is where we always started. And we start here because if you look at something and try to think about all millions and millions of species at once, you're never going to get there. And so we want to break them into categories. There are 26 orders of insects. We're going to talk about 8 of them in brief, because I think that they are probably the more common ones around here. Scientists argue all the time about these 8, whether this is the combination of 8 we should talk about. Most of them are pretty clear. The first is the odonata, the dragonflies. Odonata means teeth. These are creatures that are predators. In fact, they are some of the most successful predators in the natural world. If you look at a creature like a lion or a tiger, they are successful when they hunt 25-ish% of the time at the higher end. Dragonflies and damselflies, they are successful 95% of the time. When they try to catch something, they will get it. Dragonflies, the easy way to tell them apart is when they land, they hold their wings out to the side, and damselflies hold their wings directly above
A
their
moth and a butterfly.
And that is that the next one? No, we'll get very soon. The Hymenoptera, the bees and wasps. These are a number of them here. They include things that are really recognizable, like honeybees, but also some things that are less recognizable, such as the ichneumon, which we're not going to talk about in specifics, but we will talk about their favorite food today. The Coleoptera, the beetles, the single most diverse group of organisms on the planet. There are more than 219,000 species of known beetles and counting. We are discovering new ones every year. Beetles, like all insects, well, most insects have 2 pairs of wings. However, their front pair of wings has turned into this hard, chitinous shell, which they cover their second pair of wings with, to create something that looks like a straight line down their back. Beetles come in all shapes and sizes, from some that could fit on the head of the pin to others that can get quite large in the case of scarab beetles. Next are the true bugs, the Hemioptera, hemi meaning half. Like many insects, they have 2 pairs of wings. You see, there's starting to be themes here. 2 pairs of wings. The front pair, however, is partially hardened halfway, hence half. Where's a great example of one up here? I picked one out earlier.
A leafhopper.
Leafhopper is a great example. And so they often have this shape that looks like a shield, not always, but often, because of that hardened area of their front fixing wings. They often have a nice triangle behind their head, but we'll talk about that in a little bit. We have the Orthoptera, the crickets and grasshoppers, with powerful back legs, 2, again, very light membranous wings that they mostly are using for short flights, except for the case of something like a locust, which is going to fly a lot further. Here's our Lepidoptera, our moths and butterflies. Most of the Lepidoptera, they are the 2nd largest order of insects on the planet. Most of them are moths. Lepidoptera means scaly wing. If you were to take a microscope and look at the wing of a butterfly, you will see that it has millions and millions of gorgeous overlapping scales. And they'll actually come off on your hands if you ever touch the wing. They are iridescent, they change color in the light, which is actually part of the reason I have a color changing slide deck, because as the light hits them, they appear to be different colors. So probably my favorite order of insects, and I'm not going to talk about them much today, but that's okay. There's the Diptera, the true flies. The Diptera are a major exception. They only have 1 pair of wings, they only have 2 wings. So generally speaking, if you find an insect and it only has 2 wings,
Fly, carrying fly, something like that.
it's a fly, Diptera. There it is. Very distinct that there are no other wings here on this creature. We are going to talk about one of them today. And finally, the lacewings. This is where people start to argue because actually the true bugs can be broken up into a couple different groups. So usually the Neuroptera are not part of this list. I like to include them though because they are less well known. The lacewings, their wings look like lace, they're very light. Creatures like lacewings and antlions are in this. 26 orders, this is just 8 of them. Most of the insects you will see will fall into one of these categories. It's very exciting when you find something that doesn't, but it's really, really valuable to start to think about categories today. Okay. Here's where the ecologist comes in, and we stop talking about insects for a minute, because when we think about something in the venue of a changing world, we need to understand the place and why it's important to talk about it here. Context is something when I was studying for my master's degree that all of my professors had constantly, context. And it was really hard for us to grasp at first because it's complicated. If you had to describe this place, how would you describe Salisbury? What is Salisbury?
It's quite it's a kind of more mostly complex.
It's a town. So there is we call that a political designation. Humans have decided that this is a town. What else is Salisbury?
Green.
What's green?
It's the destination.
It's a destination. People come here for a reason. So where is Salisbury?
New England.
It's in New England. So often when we talk about context, we talk about zooming in and zooming out to help us understand a full picture of the place. And to help us do that, I want to show you some maps. Because I'm obsessed with maps and I can't help myself. So, slideshow and pull up. Yes, this is called the Resilient Land Mapping Tool. It was created by the Nature Conservancy, which is one of the largest conservation organizations in the country. This is one of my favorite tools for teaching about the context of a place as it relates to climate change. What they have done is taken a whole bunch of science, and if you want to know, they have put it in exhaustive detail about where this information comes from, to start to help us understand spatially some of the effects of climate change and some of the ways that we can make things better. So, for instance, if I turn on a layer, there it is. If I turn this one on, recognize biodiversity value, and I turn up this, you can see that Salisbury is covered by all this foliage. These are places where scientists have identified that there is a lot of diverse kinds of life. We recognize that these places have lots of different things. Diversity in the natural world is really important because when we think about change, the ability of any system, and the natural world is just a system, to resist change often lies in the diversity of that system. If one piece breaks, there's another piece that can catch that area. Biodiversity is huge when thinking about climate change, and preserving biodiversity is one of the most powerful things we can do. All right. So when we think about how things are going to change, there's a few things. Everything has to be able to either move, it has to change itself, or else it may go extinct. And the pace of change is really important. So we need both places for things to go, as well as the time for them to go there. This is one of the biggest things about climate change, is it's happening too fast. If it was happening much slower, as it has in other times, things could adapt. They could migrate somewhere else. But because things are happening quickly, it makes it hard. Identifying places for them to migrate becomes very valuable. And I'm not going to spend a ton of time on this map. After, if anybody wants to explore it with me, there's a lot of really cool stuff. So the dark colors on here represent places that are resilient, even in the face of climate change. These are places that are connected to each other. The brown are areas that the flow of organisms is concentrated. There is something preventing them from really spreading out and having a lot of options on how to move. The blue are places where they can spread out as they move. These are places that are even more resilient because there's more space. Less resilient, it becomes concentrated. It's more likely these places will be broken up. Doesn't mean a lot when we're zoomed in this far, and that's when zooming out comes in handy. If I start to zoom out, we will notice that there are places on this map that sit closer together than others. And if we zoom out to the entire region,
There's more blue in Alaska.
there's more blue the further north we go away from people. Wonder why that is. The thing I want to point out, however, is this spot right here. It turns out that Northwest Connecticut and Western Massachusetts is one of the most important connection points between the Appalachian Mountains to the south and the White Mountains to the north. These connect these hot spots of biodiversity, and as creatures move north in response to climate change, having these places where things are connected are critically important. I remember I did this talk at a housing development in Lakeville. And we were actually able to zoom in on this housing development and found that in all of the places around it, it was the only connection point between two big nature preserves. And so the argument that the people of this development were making was they wanted to preserve their trees. They did preserve their trees. I'm really glad they did because it was a point of connection. So when we talk about the specific insects that we will get to in a few moments, and we talk about the systems that they are a part of and uphold, this is part of what we're talking about. The ability for other creatures, not just them, to move in response to climate change relies on connectivity and places for them to be. Relies on the continued functioning of a place. Okay. I'm gonna hit pause there briefly before we get into some specifics and see if there are any questions about what I just told you.
Well, wouldn't if the climate got colder, the more dense it is, wouldn't it technically support a much less life in colder climates?
That's exactly right. However, the colder climates are getting smaller and smaller, and as the planet warms, places like this are actually gonna basically shift north. If I think about what the environment here was like when I was a child, it's now north of here. It's now closer to northern Massachusetts than it is here, that particular environment. Does that make sense?
Mhm.
So, yeah, there are oftentimes more biodiversity in warmer places. However, the creatures that are not from those places will start to struggle.
So do the warmer places eventually create, I don't know how to say it scientifically, biomes or environments that support other kind of life or insects or bugs?
Absolutely. And so, again, it's about pace of change. If it moves slow enough, then things will be able to adapt, and you will end up with these places where there will still be hotspots of life. And I'm not saying there won't be, but they will absolutely appear. Would they be the same as if the change was slower and things could gradually move? No, they wouldn't. But absolutely, and that's one thing we're seeing. We're seeing creatures move. We're already seeing this. Now, often it's a good thing because it means they can go other places, but at the same time, it also can drive things to no longer exist. And an example of this is the golden-winged warbler, which is a bird that is rapidly disappearing. It is likely to completely disappear from this area, potentially from the planet. And the reason it's disappearing is another warbler, the blue-winged warbler, has started to shift its range up to where the golden warbler lives. Now, they're close enough related so that they can interbreed and produce eggs of their own. The problem is their offspring are pretty much blue-winged warblers. They're hybrids, but they're much closer to the blue-winged warbler. And so as they get pushed north, the golden-winged warbler is disappearing because it's happening so rapidly that they themselves don't have a chance to move ahead of kind of that wave. Any other questions? Okay, so it is very natural when seeing a picture of an insect up close to get the willies. I'm guessing that this crowd of folks is going to be less that, but I'm used to teaching very young children. And so I always put a warning before I start putting insect pictures on the screen. There are two creatures I'm going to talk about today that look a little intense. I'm going to tell you right now, and I will warn you before I put their picture on the screen in case you don't know. I encourage you to, but you never know. We're going to talk about three today. And the first one is this, which looks way better on my tiny computer screen. Before I say what it's called, I'm curious, what do you notice about this animal?
It's a bee. It's obviously a true bug, as I can see,
Why do you say that?
because you can obviously see the triangle that connects to the elytra and the more triangularly shaped head, also you can notice the more distinct 6 legs.
Cool.
Very good. Anybody else notice anything about this? It is in fact one of the true bugs. It's a top of love bug. I had to take one true bug, please. What else do you notice about this bug?
Appears to have pollen on its legs.
It does. It does in fact have pollen.
I think those are actually mites. Aren't those mites?
Are they mites?
You know, we'll have to zoom in on the actual full quality picture and find out.
Is it an assassin bug?
It is not. Oh, and so if it was an assassin bug, those would be mites. I believe that is pollen in this case. The other thing to notice are the wings that are half as half, and so we can see that here. This half of the wing has hardened and become a partially covering shell to protect the lighter wings underneath. A lot of bugs look like shields. I've always
Is it
said,
a shield bug?
this is not a shield bug, but they often look like shield. The shield bug very much looks like a shield. Some of them don't. Assassin bugs are a great example of a bug that does not look like a shield, but a lot of them do. This is the small milkweed bug. Of the bug, of the insects I'm going to talk about today, this one doesn't do as much for us. I know I said in the description of the talk, we're going to talk about all of the benefits that these specific creatures have. This one doesn't. And I did that for a reason.
What is its actual size? Okay.
They also make a cute little clicking sound when you pick them up.
They do. Why did I pick one that doesn't have an obvious advantage for us? You didn't know this was going to be interactive.
Contrast, just a contrast.
Certainly a good reason.
Well, they may have benefit for other insects or bugs, and so therefore those bugs might be good for us and these support their life.
Absolutely. There's interconnection. Sometimes interconnections we don't even know about. In this case, that's, I would guess, although I will say, they do eat other bugs, including sometimes monarch butterfly caterpillars, not their preferred food.
Sometimes they control other populations.
Control of the population.
So then being, as I would do with a primary consumer, it would make sense that they would be controlling the population, or let's say aphids, which will destroy plant populations.
It's a great example. Neither of those are the reasons I picked this one. I picked this one specifically because it is neutral at best. And whenever I talk about creatures in relation to climate change, there's something that pushes us to think about value of an organism. I don't think organisms need an inherent value in order to be worthwhile protecting. And that's why I picked this one. It's because I think they're pretty. I like the way they look. They are part of a natural system, the milkweed plant that of course supports monarch butterflies. And I think that they're allowed to exist. And as things change, there are tons of these that we know about and don't know about that may not be able to continue existing. And I think that they're allowed to as much as the other two, which have some very specific benefits for us. So a few things about them. They live on the milkweed plant. Now, it's not the only thing they live on to eat, but 95% of their lives they will spend in these plants. Most well known, of course, for supporting monarch butterflies. The only thing that monarch butterfly caterpillars eat is milkweed. But there's a whole host of other organisms. One of them is the small milkweed plant. It eats the leaves, it eats the seeds, it drinks the sap, and yes, it eats other insects.
So it's immune to the poison of the milkweed.
So milkweed, do you want to tell everybody a little bit about that in case they don't know about the milkweed?
Basically, milkweed can be very toxic, but the monarch butterflies are one example of critters that are able to basically adapt to basically drink, and they use the poison when they grow up to basically, if an animal eats them, it won't end well for the animal.
And mostly, it won't end well because they taste really, really bad. If you ever break the leaf of a milkweed, you'll notice this latexy white sap comes out. That's the milkweed. It tastes horribly bitter to most things. It is toxic to something. Mostly it tastes horribly bitter. So anything that eats milkweed is therefore going to taste really, really bitter. And so this is a benefit for monarch butterflies. The milkweed bug is actually in a group called the seed bugs that mostly eat seeds, and this one is very similar. It will eat the seeds of the milkweed as soon as they mature. Not to the point where it's gonna kill off fields of milkweed. It's not a pest. It never gets to the top enough of them to have that happen, but it is doing that. Their life cycle is actually pretty cool. They have several generations each year, egg, larva, adult. The last one overwinters. It does not migrate. It goes under the leaves, into the crevices in the rocks, and it can survive being frozen. And so a lot of organisms will lay their eggs, which are much more resilient than their adult forms before the winter. This is one that stays pretty much awake and fully alive over the winter so that it can lay its eggs in the spring. They're really cool. Go look at them. There's a larger version that's like that big that you all can see sunning themselves on the sides of buildings. People think they're pests because there's a bunch of them on the building. They don't hurt anybody. I think they're. Okay. Before I go into the next one, this is your first trigger warning before I put this picture. This creature is completely harmless. I guarantee every single one of you has seen it before. And I think like many people when I was young, and if adults who knew me when I was young are in this room, this is not a dig on you. Most people say this. Basically, that it was a gnat. It was a male mosquito. And that is not the case. This thing, most of them don't have mouth parts. There's 15,000 of them in the world, 15,000 different species of them in the world, most of which don't have functional mouth parts as adults. The ones that do, they drink nectar out of flowers.
Yeah, mosquitoes.
And this is it here. What do you notice about this creature?
Well, considering they are one of the most deadly creatures in the world, considering that they can transbred different species of blood. And as you said, the males don't have mouths, but the females are the ones who bite.
And you're talking about mosquitoes, right? These aren't mosquitoes. These can be from this big to this big. They're huge. Physically, what do you notice? What do you see when you look at this? 2 wings. 2 wings. This is the member of the Diptera, the true flies. What else do you notice about this creature?
The bright color.
Bright color. In this case, it's not toxic, but it's pretending it is. It's trying to warn off potential predators. These are an incredibly important food source for our aerial insectivores, our insect-eating creatures that fly, birds and bats.
Did they have segmented legs?
They do have segmented legs, like most, if not all, arthropods, which these are for.
They are, they're not.
They are arthropods, are all insects.
Oh, okay.
What are those things that look like little spoons right under the?
Oh,
So some of them have that, some of them don't. I actually don't know, and this is where me not being an entomologist comes in. We can look it up after. Some of them have it, some of them don't. I'm sure there is a specific use for them, but I'm not sure. 2 wings, compound eyes, which we're gonna see even closer. They got segmented legs, segmented long legs. This is a creature known as a crane fly. There are 15,000 species of crane fly. I'm about to go to the next slide. I think if you zoom in on their face, they look like dragons.
Oh my god, it's a mimic.
Looks like. And so beautiful view of the compound eye, all of those individual parts coming together to allow this creature to see. It has antenna. This one has some antenna in the front, but non-functional mouth parts. It can't bite you. It can't sting you. And actually, as an adult, they only live for a few days or weeks. So there's a lot of different kinds. They all look like giant mosquitoes, essentially. Mostly the adults don't eat. These creatures do have a lot of benefits for us. So I mentioned one before, and that was food. Any other thoughts of what else this creature could do for us?
They're actually kind of food for the spiders for sure.
Absolutely. Yeah.
If I were to guess, they'd probably be pollinators.
That's exactly right. They're major pollinators. As they fly around and land on things, especially the ones that drink sap, they bring pollen from flower to flower, just like a bee does. There's a lot of things. They have, they make up what we call a lot of biomass. Mass of living things, really important foodstuff, really important pollinator, but actually most of the benefits come from their young, their larvae. Their larvae are mostly aquatic. They live in the water. I'm going to show a picture for them in a second. They can spend up to 5 years in the water before emerging as an adult, living a few days, laying eggs, and dying within days or weeks. They require cold water, which we'll get to in a second. Oh, I did forget this slide. Anyway. Okay, before I get to the larvae though, I wanted to talk about this. Carbon cycle. Like many things in the environment, it goes through phases. Like there's a water cycle, there's also a carbon cycle. Given that one of our major greenhouse gases is carbon dioxide, and another is methane, another carbon heavy gas, I thought it was valuable just to talk about this real quick. Carbon, of course, is drawn in from the air by plants, which concentrate. It also falls in the rain, where it is in gas form in the raindrops. It is then consumed by creatures of various sorts, which eventually die. Now, this includes trees, it includes squirrels, it includes insects. And when they die, the carbon in their body eventually makes their way into the ground. Through this process we call decomposition. Decomposition is so often underappreciated, I think. It is so critically important to both the ability of the planet to regulate carbon and other greenhouse gases from the atmosphere, but also it's the reason we don't have piles of dead things everywhere, because they can be turned into something else. Now, some of that carbon stays in the soil, and some of it, of course, respires as gas back to the atmosphere. Cranefly larvae, there's one right there, are major decomposers. They do lay them on land. This is one that's on land. Mostly they are, of course, aquatic, but they are eating dead and decaying things and turning them into something that will end up in the soil.
So we really don't see like dead fish on all the shores. Okay.
Yeah, mostly they're eating dead plant material, but there are other decomposers that, of course, eat animal material as well. One thing about these and many aquatic invertebrates, a subject that I could talk for hours on, they need cold water. Does anybody know why they need cold water though? We talk about this, and anybody here who is a fly fishing person will know that cold water and trout are very important, because trout themselves need cold water, but their food also does as well.
It stimulates growth faster.
In a way, but not, it's not the primary reason. They can't breathe as well in warm. Water has an inverse relationship. The temperature of water has an inverse relationship to the amount of gas it can store. The colder the water, the more gas, carbon dioxide, oxygen, that the water can store. So as the water warms, there is less available material to for these creatures to respirate. Makes it harder for them to live. This means that because they live for years in the water, they are really important indicators of water quality. By going in a stream, and I encourage you to do this if you've never done this, go into a flowing stream and turn over rocks, you'll see there's all sorts of creatures on them. Really fun thing to do, just be nice and put them back. The more different kinds of things you see, often it means the water is cleaner and healthier. These are very delicate organisms. They need cold water and they need to stay very similar for years in order for them to grow. So if you see them, it means they're an important indicator of water quality. I consider this a major benefit of this. It is something that we can easily access that gives us immediate feedback on the health of this. And so along with being major decomposers, they help us understand the place we and before I go on to the next one, any questions about that? Or flies in general?
How big are those larvae?
Not that big. I've seen them a little bit longer, nowhere near as big as some of the crank flies. But
And is that part of their cloaking device that they look like their background?
It can absolutely, the coloring. It's also grubs, often we call insect larvae that look like this. They're very simple organisms. And over time, they will shed their skin and slowly become closer and closer to an adult, but they spend most of their life looking like this. People often think they are completely different creatures from each other, but one is a juvenile.
Do they only live in Russian or still water?
So they live in both, mostly though, moving water. Moving water has more gas in it because it is,
Oxygen.
yeah, it is gathering oxygen from the air as it gets stirred up. But still water, you can absolutely find them. It's warmer, of course, still water is always going to be warmer than flowing water, and so there's less of it. Any other questions? Okay. Before we talk about the last creature, I want to talk about mushrooms. Mushrooms are, of course, the critically important decomposer. Mushroom is the fruiting body of a fungus. It is how a fungus spreads itself. And this particular fungus is called a turkey tail, also known as the, I only know their scientific name, they're Trametes serena. You see them on trees. Anybody ever seen these before?
Yeah, edible.
These ones here, I don't think they do anything. I don't think they're poisonous, but there are lookalikes that you don't want to eat. And so I never, this is not talking about mushrooms, and so I'm not going to go there. Unless you're 1000% sure you know what it is, please don't eat them. So they grow on trees. Specifically, they grow on trees that are not doing so well. They are what is breaking down the wood into soil. This is not a small thing. Wood is incredibly durable. It has a molecule in it called lignin, which diagrams of it just sprawls across the page. It's totally wacky, but it has a whole bunch of these rings in it. Those rings are really hard to break. There's very few things on the planet that can actually break up those rings. This is one of those creatures. So if we're going to have a forest that cycles its nutrients, you need things like mushrooms, and you need them to be able to get to places they need to go.
And then they take them, and then the mycelium roots take all the extra nutrients from the tree that's going to end up dying, or it brings nutrients into that tree.
We have learned, especially over the last 20 years, is that the fungal connections between trees are incredibly important. Nutrients move through them, water is transported through them, carbon is transported through them. They themselves are mostly made of carbon, like many things, and so they themselves are a sink from some of this carbon from the atmosphere. As they break up the wood, it gets stored in the soil because of the mycelium, the body of the fungus itself. The last group of organisms I want to talk about are the hymenoptera, the bees and the wasps. I'm not going to put up the picture just yet because this is the one I always want to warn people about. When I was a child, this picture would have terrified me.
And the parasitoid,
This one is not a parasite.
that's what we're doing.
However, many wasps are. Can you tell us what a genuine parasitoid is?
It, unlike a parasite, which feeds on its host, keeping the host alive, a parasitoid will end up killing the host.
Yeah, and so it turns out to control the population of creatures like the one I'm going to show you, parasitic wasps that lay their eggs in the larvae of other creatures are a really important control mechanism. It's how we prevent pests from getting out of hand. There's a particular pest we are seeing here in the Northeast called the emerald ash borer, which is leading to the death of most of our ash trees. And I'm not talking about pests a lot in this talk because I want to focus on the good ones, but here's an example of a place where the absence of a parasitic wasp is how they've gotten out of control. Where they're from, the emerald ash borer, which is Southeast Asia, there are parasitic wasps that specifically target this beetle. But we don't have them here. Now, there's been some discussion about releasing them. This is something called biological control, but anybody can think why that might be?
Because they become another problem.
Because the wasps usually in Asia are extremely big.
Well, it depends. And this is something I'm so glad you said that, because it turns out most wasps are tame. Most wasps don't live in hives. Most wasps aren't black and yellow. Most wasps are small and iridescently green. They are solitary creatures. They do not live in large groups. Most of them are parasites by the numbers. All of them are predators. Most of our wasps are completely harmless to anyone. And they are also incredibly delicate. This is one of those creatures that we are, again, always finding more varieties of them. Unfortunately, we will never find all of them that exist at this time because not all of them are going to make it as the climate changes. They're really, really cool. When I ran a summer camp, one of my staff was obsessed with solitary wasps. And she brought in a pinboard that was this big, all different kinds. It was incredible. Okay, I'm gonna put the picture up.
Is this a cable?
It is not. What do you notice about this creature?
Well, it's like inverted.
What?
It's the inverted of the common picture of the wasp.
How do you invert it?
Like, people imagine it being like yellow with black stripes, it's kind of inverted.
Oh, it's more like it's black with yellow strips.
A lot of legs.
Seems like it's got a lot of legs, so there are 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 with 2 antennae. What else do you notice about this creature?
Oh, I think there's like, I don't know what the spike is, but it's growing in the tree.
The spike. Okay, this creature cannot bite you and it cannot sting you. Like all bees and wasps, it does have a stinger, a structure that is essentially a stinger. It can't use them. That is not a stinger. That is what we call an ovipositor. Ova meaning egg, positor to deposit. This is a creature that is currently laying its eggs. Now, this is a creature called, common name is the pigeon tremex. It is a type of horntail. You see the horn sticking out its back, horntail. They are not exactly a wasp. They are, in fact, something called a sawfly, which is not a fly. You see the problem with common names here. Sawflies are in the same family as bees and wasps. And they often interact with wood in this way. All horntails do this. They lay their eggs in the wood of a tree. Now, these ovipositors are actually really cool, and they've been used to develop new drilling technologies because this is a creature that can actually drill through the wood to lay its eggs. So why pick this one? So I took this picture at my summer camp. I come out of my office and I hear kids screaming my name. Generally speaking, it wasn't a bad thing because if something bad happened, they would call me on the radio. Kids screaming my name meant they found something they thought was cool. I walk over to the maple tree in our lunch field, and this creature was standing on a section of the tree that was dead. There was some dead wood, and this creature was on it. Interestingly enough, it tells us that tree is probably not doing great because generally speaking, they are not going to lay their eggs on a perfectly healthy tree because their larvae need wood that has been softened in order to survive.
That's easy for them to eat.
Because it's easier for them to eat. How then, though, does the horntail guarantee that its young will have softened wood to eat?
Mushrooms.
Fungus, yes. The fungus I showed you before, when it spreads its spores, they end up on the ovipositor of the horntail. In fact, the horntail cannot survive without that fungus I showed you, and most of that fungus is spread by horntails. The horntail introduces the fungus into the tree. This gives the fungus a chance to live. The fungus softens wood, and the young of the horntail eat that wood. Now, the fungus will then go on to break the tree down. And so by laying its eggs, this creature is a bridge to 2 parts of the carbon cycle, the part where things are accumulating carbon and the part where they are decomposing into the soil. It facilitates decomposition, even though it itself is not a decomposer. That's not what I want to show. This is a nice cross section of the tree. I thought this was really cool. I found this along today. You can see one that is almost fully grown. It will then crawl out of the holes. And then you can see one of the grub larvae as well. And we can see the fungus. Now, that black line is not the actual fungus, but it is an area where the fungus has started to break things down to the point where water has gotten in and this wood is becoming soft. One of my favorite creatures. And in fact, when I saw that creature, it was really what made me want to give this talk, because I think it's something that we often don't think about when we think of the life cycle of an organism that lays its eggs in the tree, the young eat the wood, they emerge, so on and so forth. But there's this other creature that most people have seen, even though they haven't seen this, that is directly related to it. And so if we didn't have horntails, we're not gonna have that particular species of mushroom. There are plenty of others that look similar. And without the mushroom, we wouldn't have one. The next thing I want to talk about is climate change. Before we talk about that, though, does anybody have any questions about the climate? Or its fungal companion? Climate change is bad. Bad, it's happening quickly, it's happening everywhere, and people are the cause. That does not mean there is no hope, and in fact, I personally think there is a lot of hope, because the truth is, we know how to address it. We have the tools, we have the technology, and we have the resources to do it. We can do it right now. And in fact, we know that it's cheaper to deal with climate change now than allow it to continue. I wanted to share some resources with you that, for me, have been really important, and I've shared with students for years and years. One of them is this, it's called Project Drawdown. Maybe you can try Project Drawdown before. Excellent. So Project Drawdown started as the 200 most powerful solutions for climate change, the most ambitious plan to fight global warming that has ever been created. And it became a nonprofit that focuses on climate solutions. What they did was they take climate solutions and they quantify their effects in terms of both how much greenhouse gas they take out of the atmosphere, but also financial savings in a lot of senses. Wonderful website to explore. I highly recommend taking some time with it. The solutions range from very, very straightforward, things that we talk about quite often, such as electricity. Oh, that's. But also by the financial impact. Don't have to worry about what the scenario one is, we can get to that. If anybody wants to talk to me after, but. This is how many gigatons of CO2 it would pull out of the atmosphere. We need to remove something like 6,000 gigatons before the end of the century in order to maintain a world that is very similar to the one we live in now. And so each of these is really, really valuable. One that I think not all of these are quantified in terms of financials. This one is, however. And so what we can see is how many gigatons it pulls out of the atmosphere, an estimate, the first cost to implement, and then the lifetime financial savings if we implemented to this scale. Distributed photovoltaics are a great example because while they would cost up to $517 billion to implement, before the year 2100, they could save us up to $13 trillion. I love Project Drawdown. Well, I highly encourage you to explore it. This is how I would communicate often to high schoolers, very apathetic high schoolers, that there's something that can do, because this website proves it. And if you want to know the science, they have exhaustively detailed it. But it's a wonderful resource in general. The other thing I wanted to mention are your local conservation organizations. Forests, it turns out, are really good at taking greenhouse gases out of the atmosphere and putting them in the ground. And along with lessening the amount we emit, getting carbon stored in the earth is really, really effective. And it's one of the most powerful things we can do. Unfortunately, we are losing forest in England every single year. We lose about 35,000 acres of forest. What do you think we're losing it to?
Housing,
Development.
you know,
We're losing it to buildings. You live in a town that has a lot of protected land. Salisbury, and in fact, we can see it on the resilient land mapping tool. We can see all of the protected land. So. There's a lot of protected land here. Part of the reason this is a place that creatures can move through in response to climate change. And organizations like the Northwest Connecticut Land Trust. There it is. So what can you do? Well, you can do all the things people talk about, use less plastic, drive less, but you can also support conservation. This doesn't just mean volunteering, giving money, spreading the word about these organizations. It also means considering if you own land, putting it into conservation. There is something called a conservation restriction that will prevent your land from being developed, even after you are no longer there. Oftentimes that land is managed by an organization like this. They have scientists, they will keep an eye on things. It really is one of the ways to get back on the forest we're losing. I do have a document that would show us tonnage wise, CO2 wise, how much we're losing. But we won't get into that. There are other organizations, of course, the White Memorial Conservation Center down in Litchfield, close near and dear to my heart, does amazing work. There are also national organizations such as the Nature Conservancy that both produce scientific and educational materials like the Resilient Land Mapping Tool, but also protect land directly, including here in Maine. Then, of course, there are state parks and state forests. Connecticut DEEP does a wonderful job.
And we have the Salisbury Land Trust.
Salisbury.
Okay, I just wanted you to mention that.
Talk about scales. Land trusts are often kind of, they're like a nested doll. There's often very, very local ones and then ones that spread out as well. The goal of the Northwest Connecticut Land Trust is to get 30% of the land in this area protected by 2030. Not sure how close they are, but they're working really hard. This brings me to the end of what I had planned to speak about today. I wanted to talk about some creatures, I wanted to talk about insects in general, and I wanted to talk about conservation. I'm happy to stick around for questions, and as well as after we get through Q&A, we can